I'm a techie geek. I have been working with computers since I was very young. Started programming with the Texas Instruments keyboard, TI-99, GW Basic when I was 11. Learned how to build a computer when I was 13. Did graphic design for a long time, did development, learned how to build servers, learned how to build computers. I basically have covered all aspects of technology. I was a .NET developer way before I got involved in SharePoint. I got thrown into SharePoint in Tahoe and in beta, and then my first real project was a 2001 project. I'll be honest, I absolutely hated SharePoint when I first started with it. That stuck with it, been involved with it ever since, so I've come to really appreciate the product. Now, I'm also new to the whole, I'm still working on embracing the cloud, just be honest with you on that. I have been working on some hybrid implementations. I'm a BI on-prem person just based on my experience. I'm starting to do a lot more with the Office 365 and Power BI stuff. I'm very impressed with Power BI. I just don't have, you know, I think if all of us are pretty new to it, including all the SharePoint experts, because it's a new product. So unless you're on the product team, you know, all of us are still learning. And with Office 365, as you know, things are constantly evolving and changing. So what I'm going to demonstrate is everything from an on-prem environment, but the things I'm going to show you and teach you can be related to both. I am a trainer for critical path training, as well as a contractor and, of course, a global speaker. I have 2 books that have been published, co-authored the Microsoft SharePoint 2013 Inside Out book. I'm working on getting some e-vouchers. Unfortunately, this is a very light reading book. It's about 1,000 pages. So it was a bit much to try to travel across the pond with those. So I ran out of e-vouchers, but what I want to do is try to see if one of my co-authors might have one, so that way I can end up giving one away. Now I do have, and Mark, you can help me with this, I do have pennies. And so I've got 2 of these I can give away for pennies ebooks. So yeah, you can help me distribute that accordingly. Okay, so in this agenda, I'm going to talk about Excel services, just a quick overview, because what I'm going to cover is PowerPivot and PowerView, and PowerPivot does rely on Excel services. I am also going to show you a demo utilizing the Excel services REST API. I have screenshots of the examples I'm going to use that way, and references or just at least examples, so that the takeaway from my session is that you'll be able to get my slides and you'll have the references of what I demonstrated. So you can give it a try. Does anybody not know what Excel services is? Okay. So Excel services has come a long ways, I will say. In the first version, when it came about in MOS 2007, it had some issues, and then when 2010 came out, it was converted to a service application, and then in 2013, I think it's, you know, a lot better to work with. But it does give you the ability to have Excel calculation services, and you have some Excel web parts that you can work with. Now, the benefit of Excel 2013 and Excel services, especially working with 2013, is this whole self-service BI. And you know, I came from a background of data warehouses, crystal reports, things like that. So, and I was a SQL DBA. So once I started working with SharePoint and Performance Point and things like that, started working with the different in SQL reporting services, the reports that you can create. But at the time, it wasn't self-service. I mean, there was a lot of groundwork, there was a lot of things that had to be done for people that were requesting reports. Now, I do like the whole story now, the user story behind the process now that Microsoft has implemented with working with self-service. Because the best thing right now is being able to, you know, take a lot of manual processes. I had a customer that was extracting data from one of our telecom companies, very, very large telecommunications company in the US. And the problem is the process was so manual, they would get these data files, and they were Excel files. Someone would literally drive and go pick them up on a hard drive and pick up the files, bring them in, and someone then would start building reports off of these files. Well, what happened was these reports needed to be out quickly, but it took the person 3 days to do this manual process. The downside of it was many things. It was very tedious, and by the time the report was created, the data was outdated, and there was also a lot of human error. So I came in and helped automate this and leverage working with SSRS and Excel services and being able to automate a process. Now, me being a developer, I did create an event receiver. How many developers in the room? A couple, okay. So your developers can actually create some really cool features, and I actually created a feature that when these files were uploaded into a SharePoint document library, it automatically extracted the data and put it into SQL Server. Now, I didn't want it stored in SharePoint. I just had the files stored in SharePoint to get that data in. So I got the data, put it in SQL, then that's when I leveraged pulling in the data into Excel reports and pulling it into SQL reporting services. So the benefit is being able to integrate all that. Now, one of the things with the older version of Excel, though, it was hard still to kind of work with data. You really didn't want large amounts of data, because if you did, your files, it was real clunky. So Microsoft is integrating these new data models that you can integrate from various data sources, and it basically will embed this data into the file. Now, I'm told you're able to use large amounts of data. I'm not sure how large yet. I haven't tested it. But I do know there's limitations both, from being on-prem versus in Office 365. Now, you have limitations in Office 365, and I'm not providing that data because they keep changing it. So, but in on-prem, you could change the maximum upload or workbook size, so then your data models can become larger and larger. But I'm going to give you some, tips and tricks on what you want to do. Now, what you can build in your reports or your pivot charts, your PowerPivot and your PowerView, and then you can publish it to SharePoint. How many are in Office 2010? Okay. Office 2013? Okay. For those of you who are in Office 2010, you can still work with PowerPivot. It is an add-on, but in Office 2010, the add-on is not installed automatically. So you're going to have to download it and install it, both the PowerView and the PowerPivot. Now, for those of you that are in Office 2013, the add-ins are automatically installed. They're just not activated. And either way, if you had to install it in 2010, once you have them installed, you can go and activate them. And then for 2013, like I said, you don't have to install it. You would just go and activate the add-ins. So the way to access it is through the Backstage. I know that's the File tab, technical term, Backstage. So I get to the Backstage and go to Options. And go to Add-ins. And you're going to change the drop-down to COM Add-ins. Hold on, let me zoom it. Best tool ever for zooming. Okay. How's that? So you see I have my different add-ins in here, and then I have my PowerPivot for Excel. I have my PowerView. Those are both activated. Now you see I have additional things in here as well. Power Query. I love Power Query. It's very powerful. This session is not covering Power Query. But also I have Power Map for Excel. The Power Map for Excel is the add-in for using maps with Power View. And then the Power Map is the one just to use regular 3D power mapping. So you'll see I have different plugins there. I'll update my slide and actually add the different add-ins that you might want to install. And the other thing that I've noticed, the Power Map's not installed by default, and then the Power Query is not installed by default. So there's still the Power Pivot and Power View you get. So once they're activated, what will happen is you'll get your tabs. And so now I have a Power Pivot tab, and then if I click on Insert, I also have my Power View button here. Now I also have my map button here. This is for the 3D maps, which I'm not covering today, but I just want to let you know that's there. Then you see I have pivot charts and other options that I can work with. Now, working with your PowerPivot data sources, there's various data sources you can work with. The common one would be working with SQL Server. You can also pull information out of SharePoint. A lot of times you might want to do some types of reporting off of SharePoint. And then you can also build your connections. I think somebody said yesterday that if we wanted to pull some stuff through, like with reporting services, we can do an old data feed. There are some options. And then you have SAS. Now, in older versions of SharePoint, you only could do multi-dimensional data cubes. You had to have data cubes. Now Excel Services supports tabular. So you can have all your data tabular. And with working with the data models, you're able to build calculations. The reason why you built data cubes before is because you needed to build you might need to build a lot of different calculations. There was no way to really do that before until PowerPivot. And then PowerPivot came around, and now we can build these whole data models. We can build calculations on these data models. So if you look at this example here, this is a data model of some data I have. This is actually importing two types of data. I'm pulling data out of a SQL Server environment, and then I'm actually pulling data out of Excel file and brought it in. Now, when I created this, I actually created this on a server, and when I did it, that's where my SQL Server environment was and so forth. Now, this file is locally, because what happened is that things got embedded here. But I can end up refreshing the data, or have a data connection set up. I have an embedded data connection in my file, but I can also have my data connection set up in SharePoint, so that way I can constantly refresh the workbooks and refresh the data. Now, when you want to create a data model, it will automatically get created when you select multiple tables in Excel. So what happens is you start building your database connection. So this is an example I'm connecting to SQL Server. So I go through the data connection wizard. I'm going to select the database that I want to connect to. Then I can decide which tables I want to select. Now, this is what I make sure I do. You can do tables, you can do views. I make sure I'm only pulling in what I want. I've had some customers decide to just pull in everything, thinking, well, what if we want to work with some of this data? The problem is that's where it's going to affect performance. That's where you're going to have your large data model size. And especially in Office 365, you want to follow the best practices to only pull in what you need. So then what I'm doing is I go in, I select the options, I click next. When I click next, I'm going to have to put in my credentials or what type of authentication I want to use. I might decide to use, set up my authentication through Excel Services using the secure store ID. There's different ways you can go about it. Then once I go through the wizard, then it's going to take me to my import data where I can create a pivot table report. Now it's going to default to pivot table, but I can also select pivot chart in PowerView. Chances are I'll start with the pivot table, and then I would click OK. When I click OK, then it's going to go ahead and import my data. Now here is an example of, oh yeah, I don't have that other screenshot, my bad. Okay, so it imports the data. So let me go into my file. And I have a file open that already has a bunch of tabs. So I already have some PowerPivot or some pivot tables, and I have some PowerView. So I'll go through each one. Let me just go through. I have a lot here. Let's go to the beginning here. So this is, I've got a pivot table, but all this is pulling data from my PowerPivot. So if I click on the PowerPivot tab, I can go to Manage, and this is going to open up a new window. And when it opens up a new window, I'm going to get to my data. So when I get to my data, each of your different, each different tables that I brought in become tabs in PowerPivot. So there's too many PowerPivot, pivot table, pivot charts, right? I'm so going to screw up the terminology. So this, I have a sales table, a purchases table, a products table, a sales regions. I also have a time table that I created. And of course, I have customers. So when I click on each one, you'll see that my data is going to change. And then in the View section here, I can click on Diagram View. And when I click on Diagram View, it's going to give you the diagram view of your data. Now, I like Diagram View because of being a former SQL DBA. I like seeing my data models in the Diagram View. But what this allows you to do is just start working with your data model. Now, I might decide to end up selecting different columns, and then right now I have a lot of them hidden from my client tools. So I can unhide from client, and when I unhide, these will become active. Then what I can do is hide from client tools. So what I've actually done is I started to build a hierarchy because I wanted to have a customer geography and then break it down by sales region, state, city, zip code. So what I did was I started to drag the different elements I wanted to create a hierarchy. And then I hid the different options I had up here from the client tools. And when I say client tools, I'm going to go back to Excel. You have two little icons up here. You have the first one is showing you that you're in PowerPivot. and the second one is going back to your workbook. Now I could close this, and if I close it, it's going to keep my workbook open, but when I'm working with my PowerPivot data, chances are I'm going to be going back and forth. So that's why they give you this option, so I can go click on the top to go back to my other window, and then I can go switch back and forth. Now the reason why I don't always want to close it sometimes when I'm working with it is because sometimes it can take a while to load. So what I'm going to do is I would go into my data model, keep making changes until I get exactly the way I want it, then I'll go ahead and close it. And I also save. I'm sure we all learned that. Save a lot. Because if it crashes, right, you don't want to lose the work you did. Now I will say that since I've been working with Office 2013, I haven't seen any crashes yet like I did in older versions of Office. But what I'll do is I'll go click back on the Excel icon, and when I click back on the Excel icon, then you see it takes me back here to Excel. And on the right, you have your pivot table fields. What's going to happen is when you create your data, I'll click on all. I have active and I have all. It'll default to active because currently I'm working with the sales and customers. Then if I click all, you'll see I have purchases, time, and products. So each of your different tables is going to be a different section here. So depending on what I want to work with, I've got my options. Now if I click on each tab, you'll notice it's going to change because I've ended up adding filters. I've got my filters, my columns. I decide what I want on my rows. Can't speak English today. And I've got my values here of what I want for the actual values. Then if I click on sales by purchase type, so what I basically have done in this report is I've gone and created different tabs because I wanted different types of data in my report. But right now it's in Excel. So here's an example showing you, I've got my fields list, so depending upon what you're bringing in will determine what you have. Now in this example, in the screenshot, I've got different types of elements on here. I've got a slicer, I have my pivot chart, I've got a pivot table, so I have different elements on my report here. Now what happens is when it gets created automatically when you go and do the data import. So if I were to click on the data, and let's say I go decide what I want to connect to. I actually need to get on my server because I need to be on my environment. Ooh, look at that resolution. Give me a second. When I work in Office 365, I miss the days of remote desktop. But thankfully, I can remote desktop today. Okay, so now I'm on my server, and I just wanted to get on here because this is what I'm working with that I have data, and that needs to close. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and open Excel. I hope I'm on the right. There we go. Anybody else working with Windows 8 or Windows Server 2012? Do you find a little your navigation a little annoying sometimes, right? I can't tell you how many times I've accidentally gone down to try to, maybe I wanted to reboot the server and I accidentally rebooted my laptop, right? Or vice versa. Yeah, so very common to happen.
Windows 10 makes that better.
Say that again?
Windows 10 is better for that.
I haven't done Windows 10 yet.
Yeah, it's not.
Who's running Windows 10? Yeah, you guys. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to go ahead and open Excel on my server. Okay, no, I'm going to go back to my other one. So actually, let's go back to here since I can't get it open. But what happens is when you go and work with the data, and how much time do I have? Okay, I do have limited times. But I have connections here. So I have some existing connections, and then I can go add a connection. And when I add it, let's go into existing one here. I have options to add to data model. So I can go in here and I might have, okay, here's 4 different connections I have, but maybe I'm only currently using one in my data model. But I can go and add various data connections, and then when I add them, I could decide to add it to my data model. So I'd go and select the one that I want to use, click on it, and add to data model. Or I might just want to add that connection to the actual file, right? So there's different options that you have here. Another thing you can do too is, like I said, that it gets automatically created, and you have your models will be your tab layout, which I told you. But let's say you have a single table, and you want to use some of the PowerPivot features, such as calculated columns, things like that. You can actually use that. The way to add it is just select that individual table, and then right-click, and then add to data model. So there's a lot of options that you have. Then you also have your table relationships. Now my table relationships, a lot of them got created automatically, and then there's some of them that I manually created. So here's a screenshot where I'm actually going to start building my table relationships. So I've got, I'm picking what my table is, what my column is, what's the related table, and what's the related column. A lot of times it'll detect it automatically. It depends on how your data is structured, right? Then if I go here, oops, go back. I might want to see the different relationships that I have built into my Excel file. So I'll go back to Excel, and here you'll have an option from the Data tab. You have your option to click on Relationships. So when I click on Relationships, now I have my different relationships. Then let me go ahead and just double click on this one. So let's say I'll go back on my server. This is what happens when I'm offline. All right. Okay, I'm just going to go grab my file. It's easier for me to just go browse through it on the desktop. Use OneDrive? I do too. Okay, so let me I'll grab this one. Okay, so I'm opening up my wingtip sales model. I actually was trying to build a demo on GMO food because I'm so very passionate about that. Wanted to kind of do some demographics and some, numbers of what Monsanto is doing in the U.S. I heard Monsanto's trying to come into the U.K., right? Don't let them. Okay, that's why I like coming here, because I can eat your food and I don't get sick. Okay, so it's trying to open up right now because I do have some Power View reports in here. And keep in mind, this is an on-prem environment that's technically in the cloud, so it might be a little slow right now, especially when I'm demoing, right? It was fast when I wasn't demoing. So once it opens, I'll go in. Well, I'll just go back. My relationships are going to be a little broken just because I'm working with this file offline, but you get the point, right? You can go and build your relationships. You can go and manage your relationships. Working with DAX. Does anybody work with DAX? DAX is awesome. DAX is the language used for working with your data model. So it's basically for building different calculations. It stands for Data Analysis Expression Language. There is a lot of online resources on how to build DAX expressions. I recommend getting comfortable with DAX because it can become very powerful for you for building your data models. It's similar to Excel. So if you're comfortable with Excel formulas, you will start to get comfortable with DAX. The difference between it, DAX expression, the difference between the Excel, how it's different is what happens is instead of referencing columns, or instead of referencing cells, it references columns and tables. So you have your data model, right? You have your columns, and then you have your tables. So then in this case, I want the sum of the sales amount column that's in my sales table. So the sales table would actually be my sales tab in my data model. Then I have my sales amount, and that's what I want to pull in. Now what I've also done in my data model is I've renamed columns, because a lot of times you might have some specific columns, right? Depends if you're following best practices or not. A lot of companies have different type of naming conventions for columns. But let's face it, when you're building the report, you're going to want these column names to actually make sense to the user. You're going to want them to, this might have been, sales no space, AMT, or maybe we had some other things appended to it. So what I ended up doing was renaming my columns, because you can easily rename your columns in your data model, and it won't affect your actual data that you pulled from. So in this case, that's what I'm doing. I'm just pulling a sum. So you see I have my equal sign. So this is similar to an Excel formula, but in an Excel formula, you're referencing cells in the Excel file. So this is the difference. So then what I'm going to do is I would build calculations for my columns. Now there's two different options you have here. You have calculated columns and you have calculated fields. Now calculated columns is, it's going to be based on the context of a single row. And it's going to, once the data is loaded into memory, that's when it gets evaluated. So in this case, on my column 1 equals, I'm basically putting my DAX expression. Then calculated fields, also known as measures, those are used to evaluate. It's basically evaluated based on a filtered context of a single table. So this is where I would do sum, average, or other types of examples like that. This is evaluated after the data loads. I'm sorry, that's when the data is loaded. This is once, and this is after the data is loaded into memory at query time. So in this case, I'm doing the field, so in field 1, and then the DAX expressions. Now, this is something you would just start small with, to just try to get comfortable with it. And I would start with calculated columns. Work with that first. Either one. Just start off slow, build simple calculations until you get comfortable with it, and then you can go, get further. I don't know if there's any good books on DAX. I think there is. Yeah, I think there is. So you build your actual file. I have this in the wrong order. So you build your file, you publish your file to SharePoint. When you publish it, then I'm able to view it through the browser. The awesome thing is the user can go and interact and just click on the different elements. And they can click on, an item here in this slicer. This is a slicer. This is a timeline. Here's a pivot table. Here's a pivot chart. This is a pivot chart as well. So I have different elements of data, but this is all connected. So because of what it's pulling through, or how it was built on the workbook. I built this on the workbook. This is an example of a file you get when you create your BI Center site. So if I can click on this and it'll filter, and you'll see all the elements would end up changing. My data would change. And of course, it's being rendered through the browser. Now this will work the same in Office 365 as well. Be able to click on the file and view it through the browser. Now the differences would be on your workbook size. If your workbook exceeds the size allowed in Office 365, you would get a message. Okay, so I also have on my slides just some publishing requirements. This will be for your notes. I'm not going to go through it due to time. But you have different requirements before you can actually publish. There's also some trusted things you have to configure. I know there's some stuff you can configure in Office 365 as well. I'm just not sure what all has changed yet because of the Power BI. But this is showing you screenshots from an on-prem perspective, which you guys will just have as a reference. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go back into my file. Let me see if I can get this one now. I may have to do it all offline. Okay. So here I'm in my Excel file. I was killing a lot of processes earlier. By the way, if those of you that are on-prem, you may be aware of this. There's a timer job process called OWS timer. There's a memory leak. It's been around since SharePoint's been around, right? It's never been resolved, correct? On-prem, what happens is when jobs run, things should be released from memory and it doesn't get released. So every once in a while, I might go in and kill this process because it'll restart. I wrote a Windows task, scheduled task to handle that. But that just becomes annoying. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and click on another tab. Nope, let's go. Oh, I want my PowerPivot. Let's go to the other one. Pivot. Okay, so let's go in here. Oh, I can't open that one. Well, I'll just use the offline one. Okay, so going back to the offline. I have different pivot tables in here, and I'll go ahead and create a new tab. And when I create a new tab, I can go ahead and insert. And when I click on insert, here's where I have different options. So then I've got my pivot chart. I can do a pivot table. So here's my pivot table option here. When I click on it, Here's where I can select my data sources that I want to use. I've got different data sources built into here. And then when I start my pivot table, what will happen is, here's my available fields. These are the available fields that I have that's in my data model in PowerPivot. So let's say, okay, I can go ahead and check sales region. Let's go ahead and check, maybe I want to add the product category. I can drill down. Let's say, got more fields. Maybe I want category, subcategory, so uncheck product category, right? You just kind of get, so here I'm breaking it down where I have now my action figures, so I have a category, subcategory. I'm showing the sales revenue, so I can actually see what it is by category, and then I can see what my revenue is broken down by subcategory. So you see that I'm getting my data, and I'm just building my pivot chart. Then I've got my different rows and values. So when you see that I start checking options, it's going to automatically put it in my rows and values. But I might decide I want to make some changes. Maybe I have the purchase year, and I want that to be a new column. So I'm going to drag this field over here to my column. And now when I dragged it, you see that my columns update. So now I have it broken down by year. So you just start building your pivot table, right? It's another thing you're going to have to get comfortable with working with. But I start off small, just start building a report, and then start building the report that you want. Then I might decide I want to go ahead and insert a chart in here as well. So if I want to insert a chart, I can add multiple items here. I can do a pivot chart, and I click on pivot chart. I don't remember which one. I think it was that one I did. You can drag and drop. So I can decide to move it here, drag and drop, and decide what I want in the chart as well. So that way what will happen is, as I click on items too, I can put slicers, I can add different things. So you start building your report the way that you want it. So let me go click on one of the other ones I have. So in this case, I have sales by purchase type. Because I had mail order purchases, online purchases, and store location purchases. So I'm a toy company. And I'm a toy company, and what I did was we started out installing our products in stores. Then we decided to start doing mail orders. And then after mail orders, we had online stores. So we had that broken down. So then we also have the years. So if I click on 2010, actually we had our store location purchases only. When I click on 2011, it's still store. 2012, actually no, I'm going to select all. These are my filters. But you'll notice that it's all changing. Now you're going to see something else here. I have customers 5265. This is not in my actual data. What I did was, this is where I worked with the DAX expressions, so I can actually have this kind of output. So if I wanted to make changes or take a look at that, I can go back to PowerPivot. I would click on my PowerPivot tab. I can click on Manage. When I click on Manage, I'm back in my data diagram view. If I want to go back to Data View, I would just click Data View here in the ribbon. And then let's go to sales, purchases, products. Remember which one I put it in? Let's go back. No, it's in the customers. Okay. So I've actually added, if I go ahead and click on age demographic here, here's my DAX expression. So if I click on this, actually I can expand it here. Here's my DAX expression. So what I wanted to do was, I'm basically saying, checking the age. If it's greater than or equal to 80, this is what I want it to display. If it's greater than or equal to 65, right, I'm putting the age groups in here. So because this is what I want to show in the report, outputted to the user. I still think it's kind of clunky, though, on this whole text editor, right? Yeah. I didn't know if there's like a... It'd be cool if there's like a nice add-in or somebody created a tool. There's an Office app? Hey, that's it to go. Add that to our wish to-do list. Like we have time to do that. Okay, so you see I'm building the DAX expression, and then if I go back here, that's that actual column. So kind of give you some ideas of things that you can do, right? So you can really leverage that. Then, so this is the slicer. Let me go ahead and click on Insert. So you've got the slicer, you have timeline, right? I can click here. If I add slicer, I'd go ahead and select what I want. Okay, I don't want that one. Keep in mind, guys, I'm working on this offline right now. But so I've got my slicers, and let's go into another tab. So you see I have sales by customer geography, or if I click sales by product, right? I have different pivot tables, configured a different way so we can have different types of reports. How much time do I got? Okay, so now let's talk about Power View. Yeah, we need more time than an hour. Let's talk about Power View. So Power View, how many people have worked with Power View? Okay, so everyone else is pretty new. Power View is very powerful in that, notice the word power everything, right? I said it again. It gives you interactive data exploration and visualization, and it's really nice, gives you a nice canvas, a really nice interface so that you can go ahead and work with it WYSIWYG. This is also an add-in, like I mentioned. It's automatically installed in Office 2013, just not activated by default. And then for those of you that are on 2010, you would have to go and download the free add-in and then activate it. So I did show you that earlier. I went into my add-ins. It's the same thing. Just went in and you have it checked. Now, here's the differences. Well, here's one thing with on-prem. Silverlight must be installed on the client because it uses Silverlight right now to render the reports. For those of you that are in Office 365, you have Silverlight and then the option of HTML5. HTML5 I prefer because it loads quicker, from what I saw. I don't know what if, I eventually, yeah, okay, I'm not going to say anything. Microsoft keeps changing things. So eventually, I'm sure everything, will end up being HTML5 from the Power View standpoint, no matter if you're on-prem or Office 365, but don't quote me on that. There's two different versions you have available for Power View. Now, this is what I like. You have Power View in Excel, which is what I have. I showed you here that I have my Excel file, my workbook. And in my workbook, I do have some tabs. Let me go find one that is, I got a lot here. Sales revenue pie chart. So here's a sales revenue pie chart. This is actually a freaking out Power View report here. Give me a second. Don't know why it's doing that. Okay, let me just close my workbook. Oh, as soon as I did that, it stopped. Awesome. Awesome. Remember, I said save. Just showed you why it's important to save. Okay, so let's go back here. Yeah, no, that's fine. Just close it. It's opening Power View. It's going to be opening my... Okay, guys, it's not freaking out now. So if I click on this sales by pie chart, I have different elements on here. So what you're going to have is, let me go ahead and create a new Power View report. So I can click Power View here in the ribbon. So what it's going to do is insert a new tab, and it's going to insert my Power View report. Then what you have here, you're going to have your canvas. I have the top section here where I can actually put the title of my report or other, it's common to put navigational elements here. You can expand this, right? All this can be reconfigured, customized. I just taught an end-user class recently for Delta Airlines, so I had to change my terminology to reconfigure. Everything was configure. So, but I can change this and put different elements that I want in here, and then I click outside, and then I would put the other elements that I would want in here. So I can go and insert different elements. So what I would do first, I would say, okay, let me go ahead and click on sales region. When I click on sales region, it's going to go ahead and create a table. Then if I want to change that, I can change it to a matrix or card. Well, let me add state. Or not state, let's go ahead and add sales. I want to know the sales revenue, right? So you see it's just kind of, it's WYSIWYG, drag and drop, resize, different things like that. Now, when I had one column, let me uncheck my two columns. When I had one column, I only have the option for table, any table options, map, and tiles. But as soon as I add another field to my table here, now I can decide if I want to actually have some charts. So here's the options you have. You've got table, bar chart, column, other chart, and then of course maps and tiles. So when I click on the bar chart, you've got your different options. Column chart, same thing. And then if I click on the other chart, here's where I can have the line, scatter, or pie. So let's say I click on pie here. Now just, you see I have to resize it again, right? It doesn't automatically resize. But I'm not liking that I don't have the amount, so that's not actually showing what I want. Let me add units sold. Let me go back and change this to a bar chart. Right, you see I'm just changing it. And of course I'm getting my values. Now I'm not doing the data the way I want, but you get the point. So you start building your elements on here. Now I have, so this is the canvas area. I actually think I have a breakdown here. I do have this as a reference for you on your slides, so when you get your slides you'll have it. Just kind of giving you a breakdown of the ribbon, the tabs, the canvas area, and then the canvas, showing you just kind of the breakdown of those different elements. And then talks about the field list, the field well, and the filters area. Okay, so there are different elements to it. When I'm back on here, you see I have my Power View fields. I can drag and drop, and depending upon what I'm in will determine what options I have, right? So I'm in Power View, but if I went back to PowerPivot, that's a Power View as well. This is using a matrix. You see I actually have images. You can't really customize it a lot though. Like it does this blue thing here, bar. I want to remove that and I can't. I could change the color. I mean, there are some limitations on it. But now if I'm back on here, this is where I actually have back to a pivot table. And in the pivot table, you can actually have KPIs in here, by the way. It's very simple KPIs. But you'll notice my options changed because I'm not in the Power View anymore. So, but each one of them will have the fields. So I have my fields here. So in this case, I have a pie chart. I have a purchase type. So I have different, you see I have different elements on here, and I can hover over each one, I can move them, right? So I added all these, and then to interact with it, if I click on online purchases, you notice my data changes, right? So this is a very nice way, a nice interface report for the end users. Because let's face it, I'm a graphical person, I like graphical reports. But you can build these, and you can add filters. Let me go ahead and click on because I'm in the Power View tab here, I can change the theme. Maybe I'm not liking the colors. So let's say we want to go, right now it's changing the colors. Ooh, I don't like that font. You have the option here to click on filters area. So when I click on filters, and sorry, this will be a little hard to see. Then here's filters, because I created filters for the purchase type and the sales revenue. So if I expand it, right? These are my filters here, which is basically what this is doing right here. That's my filter. Does that make sense? Cool. So Power View is something that's fun to work with, I think, and you just have to start getting comfortable with it as well. So I have that breakdown for you. Now, I did tell you that there is a difference. Okay, 402. There is a, let me go into my SharePoint site. Now, this is working with the Power View tabs. I'm going to go to my SharePoint site, and I'm just going to go to one that I already have created because of time. So I have a BI Center site. I'm going to go to my site contents. I'm going to attempt to go to my site contents. It was behaving so well before this presentation. So while we're waiting it to go to the site contents, I'll just go ahead and try my other one here. Now this is the default BI Center site. Now what I've done is there's times I've created a BI Center site, or if you're running Enterprise, or if you're on Enterprise Office or Enterprise Office 365 as well, you can create a BI Center site. When you create a BI Center site, that's what it looks like out of the box. Of course, I would change it. Or I can have another type of site. Maybe I have a team site that I want to use BI on, and so I can go and activate the features on that site. Because everything in SharePoint is a feature, right? It's just whatever template you start with will determine what features are activated and deactivated by default. So a lot of times when I'm prototyping and building reports, I might build a BI Center site just so I can, have some stuff here. And start working with it too, especially when I'm just developing things. But let me go to my site contents here. Okay, that one finally went. All right, so in my site contents, keep in mind this is on-prem. If I was in Office 365, I would actually have a Power BI tile because I have a Power BI license. Power BI is an additional license. When you can build a BI Center site in Office 365, but if you want to leverage the other things, you won't have all of the BI Center features because they've kind of removed some of them out because of Power BI. Anybody in here from Microsoft? Okay, good. I hope nobody from Microsoft watches my presentations. It's services. It's about money, right? Every company's in business to make money. So yes, Power BI is cool. It's awesome. I'm actually very impressed with it. Power BI is not available on-prem, right? Whoops, sorry. But there's really cool. There's things I can mimic, so to speak, in Office and on-prem, but it's a lot more manual work I have to do, right? So there's give and take. But now what I'll do is I'm going to go ahead. I have a PowerPivot gallery. So I'm going to click on my PowerPivot gallery library. I'll go ahead and do the same in my other one, see which one goes faster. Well, here's my library. I will say you do have a data connections folder here. This is where I would go and build my data connections that I can use and embed and use in my workbook when I'm building my data models. But we don't have time to cover that, but I just want to let you know that that option is there. So I'm going to go and I want to get to my, in this case, okay, I have my BI Center site, but you're going to notice something. I don't have PowerPivot Gallery. That is a feature. So I'm going to go to my site settings. Can't remember if it's a site feature or a site collection feature. It's one of them. I'll go to one. If it's not there, we'll go to the other. So let's check the site features first. Cool. Got an idea? All right, so I'm going to scroll down. I'm looking for LMNOP. At least these are in alphabetical order. Performance point, not there. Okay, it is a site collection feature. Let's scroll down. I'm going to look for PowerPivot feature integration for site collections. So I need to activate that because it's not activated by default. My Power View integration feature is activated, but not the PowerPivot. So I'm going to go ahead and activate my PowerPivot feature. I'm going to attempt to activate my PowerPivot feature. Once it's activated, it's going to end up creating my library, my PowerPivot Gallery library, which is what, due to time, I'll just go to my existing one here, which is one that I have loaded here. Now, I already have some documents uploaded here, and this gives you a nice, I guess, carousel view. I have a carousel view that and it screenshots whatever, when your file's saved and whichever tab was selected on that save, that's what it's going to basically screenshot or create an image of. So in this case, I have a credit card payoff calculator because I was using it to show how to work with parameters. But, we don't have time to cover that, sorry. Let me scroll down. So I have my wingtip sales model uploaded into my BI Center site, into my PowerPivot gallery. Now, if I go ahead and click on this, this is going to open up my file through the browser, and it's going to render through Excel services. It's going to attempt to render. Come on, behave. So you see it's launching Excel services. It's opening up through Excel services. It's going to open up my file, and I'm basically going to see everything that I saw on the desktop. I have my tabs. I have the different tab options that I could select. I'm also going to have my Power View. Oh, awesome. Let's go to the pie chart. Okay, awesome. So let's go back. So it's supposed to render through the browser. let me go ahead and go to back to my, let me upload this one. Well, let's go back. Okay, well, we only have a little time left, so I do want to show you something else. You see I have options here. I have one of them, open new Excel workbook, and I have another option here for create Power View report. So the benefit of on-prem is that, got to go back to my file here. I did tell you, remember I said on here, there's two types of options. One is in the file, a sheet in the file. Another one is a Power View in SharePoint server report. It's basically an SSRS report. And what I can do is I can create that report as the end user. I can go in and click Create New Report. And when I do that, sorry, my demo was totally working before this. It would use my data model and my data connection. And then it would just build a whole new report, and then I could save the report. When I save it, it would save as the report server file. So this is a great thing for your users when it's working. When it's working, here's a report here, this test report. Let's see if this actually works, or if that, yeah, it errors out too. Okay, sorry guys. I totally have this all working. Now I do have, let me just go into my, go back to my site contents. Let me go into my documents to see if I have the same file uploaded, or I'll just open one of the out-of-the-box ones because I need, my Excel rest. Okay, so let me open up that one. So what I have is, let's just try the Excel Services Sample Workbook. When I open this one, it's going to render it through the browser. It'll render through the browser. You see I have the different tabs, which is awesome. When you're publishing your workbooks too, see I've got some KPI stuff going on here. When you're publishing your workbooks as well, you can decide what you want available. You can hide sheets. Maybe you only want to show one sheet or so. So you can set that in the properties. And my computer's going to freak out, so let me just go back to, oh, yeah, the server is. Okay, so if I go back to here, I can go to the File tab, and then I'll have options for browser view options. Click on the browser view options, and here's where I can decide what I want to show. Maybe I only want to show certain sheets, so I can go and uncheck the sheets that I don't want to make available to the user. I can also work with the parameters here. Maybe I want to allow them to input parameters for your ad hoc reporting, so to speak. So going back, because we only have 4 minutes left, let me go ahead and talk about the rest and do that quick demo. Excel Services REST API. This is great. I'm just going to show you the example because we don't have time to really go in depth. But what I'm doing is, let's say you have your workbooks in SharePoint. And what you want to do is you want to take some of these charts and different elements you have in your workbook and actually render it in the browser. So I might want to create an actual dashboard page. And in that dashboard page, pull these different pieces through. So this is great because especially, let's say the CEO needs a certain report, but you don't want the CEO to have to go and click on every single different types of workbooks to go find the different data that he needs. So you can use the Excel Services REST API to say, okay, let's build a dashboard page for our CEO. And we just pull in the different elements from the different workbooks so he has an overall dashboard page. Then what happens is, if that chart updates in the document, so you go make a change and update it, it will update on the browser. So there is a URL, and then I have a reference on here showing you the breakdown of it, showing you you're going to go to your Excel REST. And I haven't tried, I don't know what it is in Office 365 or if it's available, but so this is on-prem. Then I've got my workbook location, I've got what's my resource location, and then you have an option to also pull ranges. But in this example here, I'm actually pulling, using Excel REST, I'm pulling from my documents library, I'm grabbing my wingtip sales model, I'm going to my model charts, and I have a chart called customer age chart. So I have a screenshot here. You go into your workbook, you click on the chart that you want. In this case, it's chart 7, but I would rename it to something that would make sense. But if you use the out-of-the-box sample file, you just wanted to use that to try it, I would go and click on the chart to go figure out what the chart name is. Then I would go and build my string and put that chart 7 in here because that's the name that I want to pull through. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go onto my web page or my SharePoint page and go and insert an image viewer web part. I'll insert an image of your web part, and I can just put in the link that would be this link, whichever link that I'm using, right? Put in the link so it can actually pull the image. So I'm going to go here, pull the image, and it's going to pull that chart from that workbook. Now, because of time, I'm just going to show you one that I have working. If I go back here, well, I said it was working. Go back to the home page of my BI Center site. Watch, it'll be fast after I'm done. Once it gets to the home page, I'm actually rendering. I have 2 image viewer web parts. I'm pulling from 2 different workbooks, and it's going to render on through the browser. There, I have cells by region in one, and then here's another option here. So I might put a title, but you see, this is actual data pulling out of my charts. So I can go edit the page. When I edit the page, think of something. How do we get rid of those?
Questions?
Go ahead.
What's DAX stand for?
What does DAX stand for?
Data analysis expression.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and edit the page, or edit web part. We need one more question.
I think I know the one.
You what?
I think I know the one.
So then I have an image viewer web part. If I go check the properties, or go click here for the link, I actually have a relative path. I didn't put the full path. But here in this case, this is actually pulling the sample workbook. Hey, oh, Zoom, it's not running on here. This, yes, it is. Give me a sec. All right, delayed response. Come on, move, stop, stop. Okay, can you see that? Here's the example. I didn't put the absolute path, I put the relative path for my site. Then I've got it in, I'm calling the Excel REST API, I'm pulling from my documents library, I'm using the Excel sample workbook, and then there's my chart in chart 7. So if I went into that file, into the documents library, and updated this chart and saved the chart, and refresh this page, it's going to have the updated chart. I think this is cool.
How do they render on mobile?
You know what? I haven't tested that yet. That's a good question. Yes?
When does the data get refreshed for that chart? Is that on schedule only when that chart itself is?
Whenever the chart has been saved, updated.
So when someone modifies?
Whenever they modify the file, save the file, the chart gets updated. Now, the page doesn't automatically reload. It would just be when the user goes and reloads the page.
Would MDS kick in on that to not reload the image if it's changed?
Say that again?
Would MDS kick in and not reload the image if you just refresh the page? Minimum download stress.
No, it'll refresh. Yep. I've tested it. Now I would show you, but since it's running slow. One more. We can need one more question. Can you think of a question? Let's see here. We asked what DAX was. Let's see here. Darn it! I can't be creative here. Let's see here. DAX. Come on. Question. One more. Don't make me pick a number between 1 and 100.
Yeah. How many times did Christina say power?
Where is the pivot view features located?
Yeah. Was the feature she enabled site detection on site?
What? Yeah. Was it?
Connection features.
There you go. All right. Any questions? I hope this was helpful. Of course, we ran out of time, but I really wanted to kind of just show you. And I did make sure my slides are very detailed, at least enough to where you've got examples and kind of things laid out. So when you get my slides and you want to try this, I'm excited to have you guys try this because I think once you start working with it, you'll have a lot of fun, and at least I have fun with it because realizing the reports that I can create just technically out of the box with Excel and working with SharePoint. So thank you everybody for attending, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference.